Welcome to the Go Shout Love podcast. My name is Seth Carnell. It's amazing what good can be born or created out of someone else's journey and knowledge that comes from that journey. Today we are talking with Amanda Cunningham, and she runs the Glory Days Co., a refreshingly thoughtful company that is built on a mission to equip and connect families who are on similar journeys, such as families with children who have special needs. They are connected through products such as the Glory Days Special Needs Daily Planner. Now, before I go further, after learning more about this planner and hearing this podcast, if you have a child with special needs, I would strongly encourage looking into this. I do not myself have a child with special needs, but there has been an education through talking with many of these families, and there are lots of odds and ends that we have picked up to know how useful something like this can be. Again, one of the reasons that Go Shout Love exists is to connect and be a resource for these families and to bring other people into their journeys. You will hear a lot more about this incredible and important company and about how it was founded after a diagnosis with Amanda's daughter and the life adjustments that came with it. There are many topics touched on this insightful conversation. Amanda speaks into receiving a diagnosis, how that changes the culture and daily life of your family, how that affects your marriage. I absolutely love her intentionality in her representation of her daughter with special needs, not only externally, but also inside her own family. The way she describes teaching her older son about his sister and how her diagnosis doesn't define her is truly inspiring. Then, of course, turning all of that into a way to help others, you can hear that desire to make an impact in her voice and the way that she talks about it. We are very grateful that Amanda took time to talk to us. This conversation is guided by Josh Veach, one of the co-directors of Go Shout Love. Please take a second to rate and review this podcast on the platform you are listening on. And here is Josh.
As we jump in here, let's start off by just talking about you and learning a little bit about you and your family. So introduce us.
Okay, well, my name is Amanda Cunningham. I live in West Virginia with my husband, Evan, and our three children, Owen, Rory, and our newest, who's Wyatt. And we have the Glory Days Co., and that's why we're here to talk to you today.
Yeah. So the Glory Days Co. is you have, among other products, one of your big products is kind of a planner that is very specific to an audience that is dear to our hearts. So tell us just a little bit about your company and then the products that you have.
The Glory Days Co. is built on a mission to equip and connect families. So we want to equip them in the role they've been called to as special needs parents or parents who find themselves in a lot of early intervention or therapy, and then connect them to other families walking on the same journey. I had my daughter, Rory, almost 3 years ago this May, and she was arrived with a surprise diagnosis of Down syndrome when she was born. So that kind of turned our world upside down. And to fast forward a little bit, I found myself quite overwhelmed with her prescribed therapies that we had. I think we were seeing around 5 therapists a week, so 1 a day. Sometimes we'd have 2 therapies a day. And that's when the idea for this planner came to life, because I needed it for myself. And so I just started to create something for my daily use, and then it evolved to an actual product.
Gotcha. And so tell us, we'll get back to the planner and the business, but tell us a little bit about Rory and your personal journey with your family and kind of how those first couple years have looked.
Well, Owen had been here for 3 years before his sister arrived. And like I said, his name's Owen, he's 6. So that's a big brother. And then we decided, we had hoped that he wouldn't be an only child. So when we decided to have another child, that was the motivation. And I had a perfectly, typical pregnancy for 9 months. There was nothing that jumped out at anybody. And then the day she was born, we got a big surprise that she arrived with Down syndrome. And that was a tough one to navigate. I think anybody who receives prenatal or postnatal diagnosis is going to have a period of shock. And I would definitely say I had to navigate that shock for a solid 6 months. And then after that, a full year to really just come to terms with what that meant and what our life was going to look like because of that added bonus that she arrived with.
Yeah. And so what were some of those major adjustments that you talked about, kind of that big 6 months, especially, obviously the planner that you put together is a very tangible kind of outcome, I'm sure, of just kind of having to navigate the realities of, like you said, those therapies and those different things. But what were some of the other big things that you kind of saw your family adjusting to and shifting life to accommodate these shifts and changes based on this surprise diagnosis?
Oh, wow. Well, I really feel like it just completely turned us inside out, if that makes any sense. I viewed us as fairly young parents, so we had 3 years under our belt to have to navigate having a child with special needs in your late 20s. It's just not something we saw ourselves doing. So, our life wasn't structured for that. So we had to completely restructure ourselves. I left work. I had worked for 10 years in a corporate setting and was traveling a good bit. So I left my job and became a stay-at-home parent so that I could be, fully hands-on with her early intervention and getting her where she needed to be to enroll in school. That was my goal, was to have her to be able to go to a 2-year-old pre-K program. Mm-hmm. And then my husband and I had to also navigate our relationship and the expectations of our relationship with the, added demands of having a child with special needs. And what I mean by that is realizing the importance of our relationship and the longevity of it. That really came into focus, which is shocking because when you get married, that's the goal, is a long marriage. But I think it just came into focus a lot more when we had her, because we knew that she was going to be a little bit more dependent than our son will be as an adult. So she just kind of honed us in a lot. We became a much better team because of her. Navigating, I teeter to say this, some might not understand, but the grief process.
Sure.
You have an idea of who your child's going to be for a lifetime before you conceive and have a child. And then you have a really depiction of who that child's going to be through your pregnancy. Is the woman who carries and feels their child moving. You start to imagine what that baby's personality is going to be like, what they're going to look like, how they're going to evolve over their lifetime. And so when she was born and, you just hit this wall, like, boom, she has Down syndrome. Not only is it something that affects her body internally, but it's on the outside too. So to just be met with that so abruptly, you go into a grief period of mourning what you thought was going to be and getting to know who arrived. Mm-hmm. And so that was quite a process for both my husband and I. And then navigating of how to unfold all of this to Owen in a positive way over the years, so that he didn't have to go through that same process that we did.
Right. It's almost as if he's growing into a normalcy that those who haven't been exposed to that sort of diagnosis and some of those adjustments that come with that, they have to adjust. Whereas some of those rhythms and realities of life were just going to be normal for him because he's grown up with it.
Yes. Yeah, very much. And we took our time labeling. We didn't want to just come home from the hospital. Owen understands a lot. He's very observant, great communication skills. So he understands big words. And we just made the decision that when we came home, this was his sister.
Right.
And we weren't going to come home and say that there was anything other than Rory being a cute, adorable little new sister.
Right.
And so we actually just told him this past October, put a name to her diagnosis to him and explain that to him. And he was completely unfazed. And I truly believe it's because when we presented the information, we were in a positive place.
Right.
I said, to my husband, or when I blog about this process, I talked about how I kept her diagnosis to myself for that first 6 months. And when I say to myself, I mean, I didn't go out and put a public announcement out. You know how people do birth announcements?
Right.
Some people choose to roll their diagnosis in with those birth announcements. I kept it to myself because I felt like, how could I expect the people that I was sharing this information with to receive it in a positive way and not have a sadness for us if I wasn't able to deliver it that way. And so I just kind of chose to carry that over. Evan and I chose to carry that same concept over with Owen. We weren't going to share this information and put a label to it until, one, he's established a strong understanding of who she is outside of her diagnosis, and two, we were no longer in a place of grief over it.
Yeah, I think the intentionality that you guys went into that with is really cool, to focus on, we're going to celebrate our daughter. We're not going to, who she is as a person and as this baby. And then the piece that some of the complexities that come with that, we'll address those as they come, but we're not going to start her life and introduce her to our world with that being the label or that being what she is. She's just our daughter. I think that's really powerful and really sets a really great example for Owen too. We have a son that's he'll be 4 soon, and we were able to adopt him from the foster system, and I kind of think of that as the same way. In some ways we've tried to be very clear about him, just kind of the idea of his adoption, that he's adopted. Like, that's something that we want to own as part of his story, but him to never feel like that's his label or that's any really different, that it's just part of his story, but he's just Lyle to us. He's just, he's our son. And to anyone else in our family, that's, he's no different than any other grandkids or anything like that. And I think even growing up, that's something that I had to come to a place where I shifted in how I viewed some of those things. And especially when you haven't been around, if you've never really had great relationships or connections to families that have kids on rare medical journeys, some of those shifts aren't natural. You have to look into them because you didn't get the experience that Owen has of that being the normal, like that's just part of the everyday life. And so what a blessing that must be to him. He will look back, I'm sure, and see the blessing in having Rory as a sister, and all the joyous things that come from that.
Yeah, there's been so many teachable moments already just because of her coming into our family. And I mean, I think where that intentionality really rooted from was because she was a birth diagnosis, our medical team was not ready for her arrival. And so it wasn't handled with grace. They were shocked, and they didn't deliver the news to us in a very graceful way. And so we knew that our reaction to her diagnosis was really impacted greatly by the delivery of it. And so we just continue to remember that when we deliver that news to somebody else, that we just want to make sure that introduction is done in a much more tactful way, in a much more positive way. And like you said, not identifying her as Down syndrome, that it's just a part of her. It's a part of her. It's not all of her, and it doesn't define her. Yeah,
that's really cool. So you talked about those first 6 months, and then kind of how just your family and those same thing, some of those major things of life were kind of readjusted, including leaving the corporate world. So kind of fill in the gap between that stage of life and then the launching of the Glory Days Co., and specifically the idea of this planner.
Okay. So like I said, I was home with her, and it was just a whole new world to me. I hadn't been a stay-at-home mom before, and I was kind of floundering. I don't know if you've heard a lot of moms talk about how when they stay at home, their days can just start to blur together. But mine were blurring together for a lot of different reasons. It was just because, my emotional state. We have an early intervention program in our state where the therapists come into your home. So she enrolled at 7 days old. We just jumped on that really quick. And so we had every day 1 to 2 therapists coming into our house to do her therapy, PT, OT, whatever it might be. And they were giving me homework to do with her because their whole purpose is to train me to basically be her PT or be her OT.
Right.
And I would just find myself, because of feeling sad or just, you have to realize I had a baby 7 days ago. There's all of that comes along with this story. It's not just grappling with the diagnosis, but becoming a new mom and everything that comes with that.
Sure.
I was finding myself struggling to stay motivated to get up and do her sit-ups and do her tummy time in the special way they asked, and get to all these doctor's appointments and the cardiologist appointments and whatnot. And so I started to write on these big windows in my living room the prescribed interventions from the therapists. And I would have a little checkbox beside all of them. And when I was sitting on the couch and I was like, okay, I need to get up and do this, seeing those unchecked boxes really were motivating me to get up and do the work. Because then I could say, this is what I did today. This is what I accomplished for her today. This is what we worked on. And I could see it and it was tangible because with a child who has the delays, it's a very slow growth to meeting that milestone. And it can feel kind of like a grind at times to implement that work and not see the outcome for, 6 weeks, 6 months, a year, whatever it might be, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the area of development. So seeing those boxes checked off really kind of helped me keep moving forward. Well, fast forward, I think it was about a year later, I was just randomly drying my hair one day. And I truly believe myself that this was an inspired thought from God. I was drying my hair and I just had this little still voice in my mind just stop in and say, "You need to make a planner. Other people need this." And I wasn't thinking about a planner. I have no experience with manufacturing or organizational tools or anything like that. And I set my hair dryer down and I walked into the bedroom and Evan was there and I said, "Feel like I need to make a planner." And he's my yes guy, totally supports any crazy idea I ever have. He's like, "Go for it. I think you could do it." Okay. So what does that look like? And I just kind of let it go. And then 3 days later, I got on to Instagram and I saw that a woman that I respect, her name's Nicole Yang, she's a graphic designer, was announcing her exit from a company called Southern Weddings, who was run by another woman who I highly respect, Laura Casey. And I knew her work through the work she did with Laura and knew that she would know how to mentor me to make this happen. And I just shot in the dark, reached out to her, told her our story and asked her if she'd give me a little bit of her time. And she did. And that was the beginning of what's been almost a 3-year working relationship now. And, we're 3 planners in. So one part of this that I just think is really cool is that this community is so responsive to one another, the special needs community. And when I was thinking about doing this, Nicole, she was like, "All right, well, you need to go about this in a business way. You need to go do some market research and then come back to me." So I went and put the survey out. And, within minutes, I had over 50 people sign up to have demos of our product.
Wow.
All over the country, throughout Canada. And so I went and I printed up at Staples 50 copies of this, drawing basically that I had on my living room windows and mailed them out to them. And they used them for a month. And then we met in a closed group and they provided feedback. And then we weaved in all that feedback to the first volume of our Glory Days Daily Planner. So that's kind of the story. And I mean, personally, I just get so excited talking about it because I really don't even know how it happened.
Yeah.
It just feels so much bigger than anything I could have pulled together.
So at that stage, were you designing and doing all of it, or was Nicole kind of on board and helping with some of that? Or I'm just thinking like That's a lot to take on. I know how busy that must have been. You were, like you said, you're a new mom, and then you're also adjusting to these other things.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot.
Yeah, it felt like I had a lot of space in between the time that the idea came and then, bringing it to reality. I mean, this was a year process until we had the actual tangible product in hand. And I didn't put pressure on myself to like make it happen very quickly. It just felt very fluid. And so what I did is I would put a rough draft version of the design together. I drew it first, and then I went in online and did it on a program on the computer, and then I'd send it to Nicole, and she would finesse it because she's the real graphic designer.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of like coaching sessions with people. So I'd reach out to people in all different industries, and this was all through social media, and ask for a coaching session, which you usually have to pay to have a coaching session with someone. And then I'd sit down for an hour and just pick their brain and ask them questions about how to get, to bring this to reality and how to push it out to the people who need it.
Oh, that's so cool. And so when I'm just imagining sending out that survey, and then, like you said, within minutes you're getting 50 responses. That had to be like a holy smokes moment of, this is awesome. I mean, this whisper is turned into tangible, action. And now it's like you're getting this market validation of like, yes, this is really, other people really do need this. What a cool moment.
Yeah, it was such a cool moment. And it brings me to tears a lot of the time when I think about it, because like I said, we had that poor diagnosis, and we weren't met with any resources. We were just, here's a cardiologist appointment, go home and love your baby. There was no connection to community, no description of what our life with Down syndrome would look like. And so I had to do a lot of digging, and I found the DSDN, which if you haven't heard about them, go check them out. They're a great organization. Saved me a lot of pain and sadness. And then Instagram, just looking up families through hashtags related to Down syndrome and seeing that they were having a happy, joyful life. So making this planner, it's more to me about meeting them with something that's going to help them feel understood and seen, because when you open the planner, our stories in there, and it's raw and it's real. And then equipping them, which is providing them with a tool to manage their new reality, and then connecting them to the things that I just told you, the DSDN and families online. And that's what's all inside this planner.
Yeah.
We link them to those resources and those people.
Oh, that's so cool. The name is unique. Tell us about what was the idea behind the name? What's the story there?
Well, my grandmother's name is Gloria, and when I was pregnant with Rory, I wanted to name her Glory. I just we'd be at church, I'd see it in songs. I want to name her Glory. And I got pushback from everybody around me. Nobody was on board. So I caved, and her name's actually Aurora. Her dad picked that, and we call her Rory for short. So when I was thinking about a name, that name is what I went with, like Glory, because I wanted to name it, and the product is inspired by her. But it's also the glory days. A lot of moms say that when they look back, these are the glory days. And I think we're capturing those days in this planner.
Yeah.
And I think we can sometimes think that because our children have special needs, that we're not living quite as good as a life as the typical child. And that's not true. And I really encourage people to keep their planners, so that they can look back on these days and remember, because we have gratitude sections and intention sections and things like that. So they're, somewhat of a journal, so they can reflect on that experience and realize these are the glory days. These are the days of our life.
What a really cool idea. And the idea of keeping them and letting them collect so that you can go back, and they almost serve as like these like stones of remembrance. These like, this is where this happened. This is where, Rory accomplished this. This was the goal. This was the inchstone or milestone that we worked for several months, and it happened. And at that time, that was the big deal. And now we look back, and she's come so far that it's, maybe that's no longer a big deal, but you get that sense of being reminded of where you've been and where you're going, and like the things that the accomplishments and the things that maybe you've learned along the way. What a cool guide to really impactful things. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's helping me right now with her journey with speech.
Yeah.
Because it used to be walking. We had to get her to walking, and now we're trying to get her to verbally communicate. And so going back and remembering the tedious work it took to get her to be able to walk is giving me the strength to remember the time that it's going to take to probably get her to speak, and to just trust that, like you reflect on what you've been through and know that it's going to happen.
Yeah. One of the things that's really cool about the planners that you have is that like you mentioned, you have very guided sections, like very specific, and that kind of helps families stop and reflect on gratitude, or place to put in those tangible needs of, appointments, but also those kind of intangible things of self-care check-ins and things like that, a place to record recent wins for your family. Talk about some of those things and how you landed on what those sections would be and why you thought those were important to include in the planners.
Okay. Well, I'll start with our daily pages. The daily pages have the self-care check-in, and then below that is appointments, and then below is therapies and meals and notes. So the reason I did the self-care check-in was because as a caregiver, we're usually the last person we're checking on. We'll run ourselves pretty ragged trying to meet the needs and get our people to where they need to be. And so if we're run down and we're not checking in with ourselves, we're not going to be able to serve others well. So
Right.
I wanted them to feel like, and I was really specific with the wording of that. I was like somebody standing there asking you, how are you today? And I tell the people who buy the planners, like, I'm truly asking you that every single day. And I want you to write down how you truly are feeling, good or bad, whatever it is. Check in with yourself. And then appointments and therapies. A lot of people ask me, why do you have those two boxes? They seem pretty similar. Well, I'm a mom of multiple. I have two typical sons, and then I have my child with Down syndrome. So our life is a mix of demands, and sometimes appointments and therapies are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Appointment could be PTA meeting, could be soccer game, could be me meeting people for lunch, whatever. But there's always that space for the intervention because it is, fluid throughout our week. We always have that. It's always going to be there. And then meals comes from our test group, our demo team. They really wanted that, so we added it. And then you got the hour by hour breakdown.
Yeah.
I put the gratitude in on the weekend so that you could reflect back on the week. I think things can feel heavy, and sometimes we really need to be intentional about pulling out, what was the best part of our week and what made us feel like we really appreciate the experience we're in. The heart of the planner are the therapy pages. That's what really makes us stand out from your average agenda that you can go to Target or Staples and buy, or other planners online. This is what makes it designed uniquely for a parent who's navigating special needs or any kind of intervention programs. You have Monday through Friday, 2 pages that run Monday through Friday, and you have 4 boxes per day that you can write your therapy in. You can write, just the basics, speech or OT or PT, whatever, or you could break it out into the actual therapy action. And then beside that, you have wins and concerns. The reason I felt like that was important is because I have 7 days between the time I see my child's therapist, and they would always ask me how she did, where she's at, what worked, what didn't work. And when you have 5 therapies a week and 2 other kids in life, sometimes it's hard to really remember with clarity what was going on, so that they could prescribe a therapy that would be meeting them where they were at now versus where they were the last time they saw them. And so that's why that space is there, so you can capture it in the moment.
At Go Shout Love, we do amazing things for amazing families with kids on rare medical journeys. Each month, we shout love for families through the sale of creative apparel inspired by the kiddo. This month's design is inspired by Maddie from Liverpool, New York. The amazingly made t-shirt design reminds us that every life is beautiful. Please visit our website at goshout.love to support Maddie through the purchase of a t-shirt, hoodie, tumbler, hat, or other items. Every item sold in March will be used to help replace the deck in their backyard with a patio and ramp that is easy for Maddie to navigate. You can also start a subscription and shout love every month. Please just use the discount code podcast at checkout to get $5 off your first month.
From a company standpoint, share with us what's like a major win, or if you kind of look back. You said you've been doing this for 3 years now. Is that right?
No, we've been selling planners for one full calendar year, and now we're in our second calendar year. And then we had a year of the manufacturing process. So we've had one solid year of selling, and then we're in our second year of selling. Okay.
So as you look back on that season, what's been a major win or two just from a company standpoint that you've kind of looked back and can celebrate?
That we're still here. We're just doing this, off of our savings. We're a debt-free company, so we haven't taken on investors or anything like that. This is basically just like a bootstrap kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we've just covered manufacturing cost each time is just huge. It's really scary when you put those orders in with our manufacturer, because you never know, is the market going to like you, or are they going to be done with you? Is somebody else going to come along and have a better idea? And we're just kind of doing this out of our home and one day at a time. So the fact that we're still here is a huge win.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you've been able to, one of the great things about being that bootstrap type of company, because that's very similar to what we are, is that you get to very closely interact with your customers, and you get to really sense and hear and feel the impact that you're having. So are there stories that you've received from customers, from other moms or dads that their lives have been impacted and have experienced that structure and encouragement and some of those rhythms or patterns in life that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have received if not for this, pursuit that you've been on through this company?
Yeah, we've received emails and connections on social media about individuals who've received them and the way they receive them. And every time it's just validation to keep going and keep risking. Yeah. Because, we're able to meet them where we weren't met, if that makes sense. Sure. And so I just feel like, I know it's just a little book of paper, but it just feels like a rescue. Kind of, somebody is lost. They're not really sure what to do next. And they're gifted this planner. And inside of it, it tells them about the emotional process we went through and, how to shape their days when you can't even think about what you're going to do next. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so hearing that it's meeting that need, it's everything. It means so much to me.
Yeah. Well, and it's like a fulfillment of that step that you took. You talked about kind of being in the, getting ready for the day and then having this thought. And then the scary part maybe even was just telling your husband, like, hey, I have this idea. Because then once you say something, when it comes to those sort of ideas, once you put it out there, there's a certain level of accountability, or a certain level of we got to explore this. And to be able to hear that feedback from those people that are being impacted, it has to be affirming of we're doing the right thing. This is something that we should be doing.
Most definitely.
What would you say to a parent that has a child on a rare medical journey and kind of has the same sort of thought? Because I'm sure that when you have a thought of, I want to create something or develop a business or an idea or launch a nonprofit that does it's very purpose driven. Obviously to make those things work is a ton of work. I mean, there's a lot of energy and stress that goes into making those things happen. And so if you're a parent, if there's a parent that's listening that has a child on a rare medical journey and has an idea like that, do you have any advice that you would give them on, how to make steps towards that dream, or how to respond to that dream in a way that's honest, but also not something that they're afraid of? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, because our days are pretty full. So I would say, just for me, how I kind of tried to have the discernment on it was, how does it feel like inside of you when you think of it? Like, does it feel like it has to happen? Is it a really strong pull? If you can't let it go, then you need to do it. And that's how I felt about this. Is it felt like a pull. It felt like something that wasn't going to leave me alone until I took action. And then I think, when I look back, something that I did differently with this versus any other thing that I've ever tried to do in my life, whatever it is that I wasn't a mad dash to a finish line. And I didn't feel like I needed to put it on display right away and tell a whole bunch of people or bring a whole lot of people into it. I just really kind of took it slow, kept a hold of that feeling and sat in that feeling of it pulling me, and then just on a daily basis followed it. Like I said, Nicole popped up and reached out to her, and then that was a yes. And then I took the next step. So I didn't really think too far down the line. I just followed the pull and took it one step at a time, kept it small, and it played out.
Yeah. And
that's what I'm trying to keep doing right now, which it gets harder as you get deeper in.
Yeah. That's good. It's such a, I don't know if people understand the work that it goes in to make some of those small businesses function, especially when you're trying to manage just life and family and all those different things. And there's a ton of things that happen in the back end that most people don't even see or recognize the amount of time that goes into it. And what an awesome thing that you guys have put together. And I can only imagine how many people it's helped and will help in the future. And it's just really cool. I'm excited for the work that you guys are doing. You recently launched the Glory Days Foundation, which is like a nonprofit arm of what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about that and the work that's happening there.
So when we were selling the planners, the first round of them in 2018 to 2019, we would have a lot of people reach out who were in, NICUs, hospitals, therapy centers, nonprofits, things like that, asking for donated planners. And I couldn't say no. I would send planners out. And then my husband, when we go to do our taxes, is like, we have to cover the manufacturing. We can't just constantly give them away.
Right.
And so I had to really think about, like, how can I still do this? Because, that's the population that I want to serve. Of course, I don't want to say no to anybody who needs a planner or thinks it's going to help someone. So a nonprofit was the way I was going to do that, because people started to offer donations, but I can't take donations onto a retail side for tax purposes. Right. And it's not as attractive to the donors. So I have some past experience in the nonprofit world, and started asking around and met with somebody who had a current nonprofit who was looking to get rid of it. And we did a transfer. So that is much easier. I've started a nonprofit before from the ground. It's a tedious process.
Yes, and expensive.
That you need to have, very expensive process that you need to have a team to do. That's not a place, just being fully transparent. I did not have the time for that.
Right.
And when this person actually approached me the first time, I told them no, because I felt like it was too much to manage. And they waited a year and came back and asked me again. And so I was like, okay, this is one of those things where the pool is leading, like if it's knocking on the door and I didn't ask for it, then I need to say yes. So I said yes. And then this July, it officially transferred over and became the Glory Days Foundation. And we started accepting donations. And we've had $6,000 in donations so far this year, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we just did a planner gifting to our state early intervention program, Birth to 3. And so now when a parent is enrolled, their enrollment coordinator will gift them a planner on the day of enrollment. So that's really exciting.
That's awesome. So then that foundation, then it is the primary purpose then is to be able to cover the manufacturing costs of the planners to go directly to these families so that these moms don't have to purchase them.
Yeah, so we still have the retail side. So
Yeah.
if you find us online, you can purchase a planner. But if you're a hospital and you want to have planners, and you know somebody that would like to donate the planners to you, they can donate through the foundation, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
They would
that's awesome.
contact us and make a donation on your behalf, and then we would send the planners out, and we do that at cost.
Cool. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so cool to hear about the work that you're doing. Before we wrap up, where can people connect with you and your company, and then also go and make a purchase for themselves or for a friend that they know could use this?
Well, you can go onto our website. It's theglorydaysco.com. Our first page has everything you need on there about the foundation, about the planners, and about our community. And then if you want to connect with us on a day-to-day basis, Instagram's where we're at. It's just the Glory Days Co. And that's where I share my day-to-day with Rory and Owen and Wyatt.
Awesome. So cool. Thank you so much for being a guest and for having the courage to step into that whisper of an idea and no doubt impact hundreds and thousands of lives because of it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share today.
This episode is brought to you by one of our proud sponsors helping us shout love for Maddie through the month of March, Chick-fil-A of Cicero, New York. Feed your raving fans or make some new ones with catering from Chick-fil-A. Order food that people love and have it delivered right to your home or office. For your next business meeting, birthday party, or holiday celebration, Chick-fil-A has you covered. Head over to chickfil-a.com and reach out to the catering crew at Chick-fil-A Cicero to get started. A special thanks to the team at Chick-fil-A in Cicero, New York for helping us shout love for Maddie. I have to say, I love saying those. Not only do we really enjoy individuals and families shouting love, but watching organizations participate is also very meaningful to the Go Shout Love team, as well as the families. Thank you for listening. I hope you took something away from this conversation. Please take a second to rate and review this podcast. Go to our website, goshout.love, and shop around. And please keep checking back for more great conversations that can help us all, in much louder ways, go shout love.